Hello. I'm going to talk about Keir Starmer being thrown out of a pub. But before I do, I want to remind you of the Bernie Sanders incident. Most of you will remember that during the campaigning that he was doing for the presidential primaries in 2015, gosh, was it that long ago? Goodness me, doesn't time fly when you're having a social breakdown? Anyway, to refresh your memory, Sanders was making a speech when a couple of female Black Lives Matter activists stormed the stage, pulled the microphone out of his hand and made their own contribution. If it was their intention to wreck Sanders' political ambitions, they certainly succeeded. I think those brain-addled idiots thought they were making a political point, but I didn't hear what they wanted to say, and I doubt anyone who did hear remembers it. What we all remember is Sanders standing helplessly by while two young women make mincemeat of him and of his bid for the presidency. Now, I'm not blaming Sanders for standing by. What did we expect him to do? Punch them in the mouth? Try a few judo throws? No, there wasn't anything he could do, but that's the point. He and his team had not prepared for the eventuality of someone getting onto the stage and taking over the show. More than anything else, it exposed the student activist attitude of the Sanders team, and indeed of Sanders himself. It exposed their lack of organisation. That is, they had this thought, just get up there and rail at the establishment, and if someone else comes in to support you on that, do a clenched fist salute or something and shout right on. The problem was that as a presidential candidate, he couldn't do that, so he was stuck. Now to Keir Starmer, same thing. What happened was he went to Bath, that's the city, the place where Jane Austen set a lot of her romantic fiction, the place where people, even the bounders, are supposed to act like gentlefolk and thus disarmed by expectations. Sir Keir stepped into a pub to socialise with the natives. Actually, I don't know, you're not supposed to go into pubs yet, are you? You're supposed to be doing your drinking outside. So I don't think he should actually have been in there in the first place, but, well, I don't know. He was wearing a mask. But what happened next was all over the news. The outraged pub landlord, one Rod Humphreys by name, flew at Starmer in a fury, shouting, "That man is not allowed in my pub." Well, at least he didn't swear. It was Bath after all. Starmer was forced to retreat in some confusion while one of his heavies cornered the irate landlord and kept him in a corner, literally. I have a picture, I'll put it up there, while Starmer made his escape. So, what you may ask is wrong with that? At least Starmer did have a heavy to make sure he wasn't filmed actually being collared and propelled through the door like you get in one of those westerns where the hero rides into town and stops just in time to see the local drunk being ejected through the saloon doors and landing in a heap in the horse trough. No, Starmer's team had made sure that their boss had his bodyguard, but what they didn't do, by the looks of things, was find out if the landlord of the pub was prepared to welcome their guest in the first place. No, Starmer and his team appeared to be so sure that they'd be welcomed that it didn't even seem to have occurred to them that they might be regarded with some contempt. And I contrast that with Boris Johnson also campaigning on the same day. But when he went to visit a local pub, his team had obviously first made sure it was a place where the jolly publican remained jolly, and even allowed Johnson to pull a pint. And, well, Johnson couldn't remember the name of the mayor he was there to support, I might say, when asked by a journalist. But that news paled into, it would have been an important thing, but it just paled into insignificance against the much livelier optics of the leader of Her Majesty's loyal opposition in a spat with the landlord of a pub appropriately named the Raven. And I shall resist the urge to mention that the landlord was obviously raven mad. No, I won't say that. Okay, so that's what you might call Starmer's Sanders moment. But wait, as they say, there's more. Some of you may remember that Gordon Brown, for those of you not keeping up with British politics, he was the Prime Minister after Tony Blair and before the defeat which has put the Conservatives into power thenceforward. Anyway, Brown, while campaigning in Rochdale, met a woman called Gillian Duffy, a widow who had worked with disabled children before she retired, and generally speaking, you could say, an all-round good egg. She spoke to him about the problems of immigration in her area, specifically about Eastern Europeans and the strain that this was putting on the local services. Brown emitted some platitudes to Mrs. Duffy and then, forgetting he had a live radio mic still clipped to his lapel, got back in his car, and when an aide asked him about the conversation, Brown described Mrs. Duffy as just some bigoted woman. That was a bit of a cause célèbre at the time and exposed the head of the Labour Party for what had become obvious within all of the Labour Party, its institutional contempt for the voters it took so casually for granted. Because it was obvious that Brown had heard the word immigration and had ceased to listen to anything else Mrs. Duffy had to say. The landlord of that pub in Bath was angry with Starmer, not because he thought Johnson was great, but precisely because he didn't. He thought that Starmer and the Labour Party should have been standing up more for people like him, who they've really had a tough time in the chain of lockdowns to which we've been subjected. And he was railing at Starmer and the Labour Party for not being a proper opposition, which they are not, and which I've said several times. And Starmer did a Gordon Brown on him. Not quite the same way, of course. When he explained to an interviewer his position on the lockdowns, he implied that Mr. Humphreys was denying that COVID was a thing, when in fact what Humphreys was saying was that the opposition was not doing anything to protect the working classes and small businesses. I'm not sure when now, because there are some contradictory reports, but either before or after the throwout, Starmer said to Mr. Humphreys, "I really don't need lectures from you on the pandemic. Nurses have been having to work." And there you have it. The Labour Party gets a lot of its support from the National Health Service workers, and he felt more beholden to them than to the rest of the working classes who, it has become apparent, cannot be relied on to be so much of a predictable bloc vote. I don't think that the average working man will be too impressed by the contention that nurses have to work. Most would say that that's what they're there for. Meanwhile, their own small businesses and trades are collapsing. And over and above the amusing pictures of the altercation, I think that what will be remembered were those words, like the Duffy incident, that they will echo much louder next time that there's a vote, which actually is going to be in May. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the Graniopteryx design or Granbo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.graniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.